Hello folks, the Y Guy here again. Welcome to my home on this very, very hot summer day. And usually when it's hot like this in the summer, yellow jackets are out. So if you happen to see me distracted a little bit and doing a little bit of swatting, you'll know exactly why. And my apologies to the extreme Buddhists that might be watching this. I don't mean any insult by swatting at a potential relative. I hope that made sense. But anyway, the name of this video is called The Y Guy Compares Jesus to the Christian Church. Now, my comparison between Jesus, I believe is going to be a fair comparison. I'm going to do my best to be objective. And all I have to base it on, folks, is the things that I have read within Scripture of what Jesus did. We've all heard of that WWJD, what did Jesus do? What would Jesus do? But I'm more of what did Jesus do? I'm more along those lines. I'm kind of a novice historian when it comes to ancient history. And because I love different cultures, I love differences in language, and I love comparing those things. I just do. And because I love to know the reason why people believe what they believe. That's why I'm called the Y Guy. And I like to know where they got that stuff from. So it just takes a little bit of research to understand culture and language. And frankly, that's what context is all about. It's very little to do with reading a verse before or after a particular verse, and reading the chapter. I mean, it's more entailed than that. It goes into much more detail than that. And I like to get into that detail. Okay? I like to get into the minds. I know you can't, but I like the idea of getting into the minds of how they might have thought back then due to their surroundings, and you get my point, right? So I'm going to do what I believe is a fair comparison to what did Jesus do compared to what the church is doing today. Okay? And when I mean church, I mean generally speaking, not your particular church, okay? Your particular church may not fall within these parameters that I'm going to point out, but okay, again, you're following me, right? So as an example, when people followed Jesus, the sick were healed. Sometimes that happens. It happened to me personally. As a young man, I crashed hang gliding. I completely pulverized my left elbow. This one, that I'm not supposed to be able to move like this, okay? Either this way or this way, all right? It shocked the doctor, completely blew him out of the water, the surgeon. And because in church, I was completely healed. I mean, totally. Within 3 days of surgery, the cast was taken off, and I had no scar on the bone tissue whatsoever. And yet, I saw the previous, the X-ray, that had hundreds of little fragments of pieces of bone that it was shattered, literally shattered. There was even talk of amputating my arm. So I know what it's like to be healed in a church service. Okay, so sometimes it happens. You see how I'm being objective? But most of the time it does not happen, and I often wonder why. Why is that? Maybe it's some kind of not a test, but maybe so, I don't know, of how are we going to treat those who aren't healed? Are we going to judge them for not being righteous enough, for not believing enough, for not having enough faith, I've heard all of the puke, because that's frankly what it is. It's not love. Is puke, okay, that these judgmental people put on each other. And maybe that's a consideration. When I read about accounts of Jesus, he would turn over tables in his church, in his synagogue, of where they were profiteering because of their church. Do you think profiteering is still within our church congregations? You betcha they are. Okay? I was in leadership. I know exactly what's going on. And I know what's going on behind the scenes. And it's not all malicious, but that's always in the back of the mind of the church leaders and the people who pay the bills and rent and what have you. Now, here's something to consider, too. Along these lines, as long as the doctrine of hell is preached, churches are still promoting fear. And as long as fear is promoted, churches are financially exploiting that fear. Okay? They think they're doing it righteously. They think they're doing it for the right reason. But the bottom line is, okay? Oh, yeah, they will say, well, it's to save the lost from hell. You know, I don't know who it was. It was Gary Amaral that did a video on tentmaker.org. I challenge you to look that video up and prove him wrong. Where he actually did a study on the various Bibles that had hell in them versus the Bibles that didn't have hell in them. Okay? The ones that had hell in them sold astronomically, by far more than the ones that didn't have hell in them. That is proof. That's statistically proof that hell. Okay? I hope you're getting that. Now, when Jesus challenged church leaders, because that's what he did. He challenged church leaders. So when he did that, yes, they called him names, did all sorts of things to him. They eventually crucified him. You know, the church today is doing the same thing, other than the crucifying. Well, they will socially crucify you. They'll call you names like heretic, rebellious, and on, that kind of stuff, if you don't line up with them. And they'll try to kick you out. Okay? So I'm just comparing here, folks. Now, in Jesus' day, the hungry were fed. You know, that very same thing is going on today. I have to commend a lot of churches. They are feeding the hungry. And kudos to you, folks. You know, bless you for that. But you're far and few in between. The vast majority of churches they're not. I was going to say something a little more derogatory, but they're not. Now, in Jesus' day, all of the folks, the wealthy, it didn't matter, or the poor, the opposite, the tax collectors and prostitutes, they were welcome in his company, in his presence. Think about that. About your own particular church that you go to right now. Would that be the case? I'm sure the wealthy would be welcome. The poor would be tolerated, I think. The tax collector, I don't know. They'd probably keep that to themselves, keep that close to the vest, and not let anybody know that's what they did. Okay? And I highly doubt the prostitute would be welcome in most churches. Most churches I went to, they would be. Okay? I ministered on the street with Agape Force. That was the name of a group years ago. Keith Green promoted it when he was alive, and I was on the streets in East Colfax, right next to the Air Force Base, and as a young man, I'd go out on the streets and talk to pimps and prostitutes and drug dealers. So, I know what... Anyway, you get my drift. I kind of know what I'm talking about, all right? People, I'm going to get a couple more in closing. In Jesus' day, people that were in spiritual bondage were set free. And I'm going to bring this up again. Yet in the church of today, the modern church, as long as a doctrine of hell is preached, folks, people are going to remain in bondage. They are. Because it's coercive, it's manipulative, and it's fear-based. You know, what gets me is Jesus came to show the people, including the religious leaders of his day, how they had God all wrong. It was wrong. They were not sharing the true nature of God with the people. They had so many rules and regulations and punishments and laws and all of that set up. And put those people in bondage. The Christian church has done the exact same thing, folks, with that doctrine of hell, that insidious doctrine of hell. Not only were the people in Jesus' day slandering God's very character and his nature. Just read some of the accounts of in the Old Testament of God killed these people, and then he killed those people. He destroyed this city, destroyed that city. He went in and he wiped out all the men, women, and children, including their puppies. You know, I'm telling you, folks, God didn't do that. But yet, today, this very day, people in the world think that's one of the reasons there's atheists. Is because that slander of God that took place. And Jesus came to show the opposite. That God wasn't that way. That God is love. God is a loving Father, forgiving. And yet, Christianity today pushes this damned hell doctrine that does nothing but slander God. And the same people that are scoffing God from these stories in the Old Testament, they're scoffing God now because of the Christian church promoting this crap. I hope you're getting it, how insidious it is. And in closing, and here's my favorite, okay? Those who consistently spent their time with Jesus, they were loved, they were encouraged, they were taught, rather than being used and exploited. Now, most of us who spent a lot of time in church leadership, as I have, you know, sure, we experience love. We all do. I don't care which congregation you go to, which denomination to. There is a form of love. It's not unconditional, though. Not the kind that God offers. And what gets me is these same people who believe in hell, this just popped into my mind, same people who believe in hell, some of them actually say God has unconditional love for you. And yet the vast majority of people are going to go to hell. You see, it doesn't add up. Well, God loves them. Yeah, please. Anyway, most of us in church leadership, we were exploited. Simple as that. We were used and exploited. Yes, we were loved. Most definitely. I felt so much love from people. But it was only if. It was only if I performed good, you know, being a praise leader. And by the way, that also something come to my mind. There are those who will scoff at that whole thought of praise and worship leaders or praise and worship ministry teams or all that kind of stuff. You know, some of you are full of crap too. You know, even though you might be in my camp of a non-hell believer. Well, I used to believe in hell. I got to point that out in this video. I used to promote it. But those of you who are now anti-church, so to speak, anti-organized religion, or along those lines, you're anti-praise and worship and stuff. You know, there's some of us, believe it or not, who had a pure heart. We actually did. We had a pure heart and towards God, and all we wanted was people to come together in unity and literally sing a prayer. We looked at the music and the songs as nothing more than a prayer put to music. That's all it was. It was communion with God in prayer. And yet none of you who are against this praise and worship, and that none of you would be against prayer, would you? And yet some of us, that's all we wanted to do was promote that. So keep that in the back of your judgmental mind, okay? Well, anyway, folks, in closing, if I've made any of you think a little bit, just think about some stuff, comment about it. Give me a positive comment to encourage others. Give me a negative comment, too. Give me a thumbs up to confirm your comments, or a thumbs down. You know what I'm saying? But be polite in leaving comments. If you're not, I will get rid of your comment. Not you, personally, but you get my point. And consider looking me up on Facebook. We have a group called the Why Guy Group, where a lot of questions are asked and a lot of questions are answered. Okay, at least to the best of our ability, to the best of anybody's ability who sees through a glass dimly and who wants to remain humble and who wants to remain teachable. You know, that's one thing that we need to have in common with each other, are those three things, okay? And I also have an avatar a name called John Anthony Jones, another timeline which is public. And whew, boy, can we get into it on that one, because everybody's jumps on board on that one, seems like. So anyway, folks, I meant this with a pure heart, again, a pure motive. And just to do this comparison, the Why Guy compares Jesus to the Christian church, and I should say the modern Christian church, because there are some major differences between history and the ancient Christian church and how the Christian church is today. It's huge, the difference. If you want to discuss it, look me up. Thanks for viewing.